This is a very intimate letter, even more so than 2 John. And it's my personal preference. There is no hard evidence one way or the other. It would appear 2 John was written to a church in general, and then 3 John very clearly is written to an individual. The discussion is that individual part of the church that received 2 John, or is it a different group? It just seems to make sense that this Gaius that we're going to see is a member of the church that received the letter from John that we call 2 John. So John appears to have a relationship with this church, and it probably is the same church that 2 John was written to, but this letter is a much more personal and intimate one, written to one fellow, presumably a leader in this church, a person of influence in this church named Gaius, giving him some instructions on how to respond to this problem dynamic that was existing in that church. But John doesn't give an expositional discourse on why these things are problems. He's making some assumptions. And in making those assumptions that Gaius would know and embrace, he appeals to these foundational truths so they can together move towards bringing reconciliation to the scenario that's happening. So I think the best way to work through this is just to look at the various personalities, how this letter flows, and what it is that John is saying to Gaius and the instructions that he's giving him on how to respond to this struggle, this dynamic that is infiltrated and causing damage within this church, whichever church this is. We really don't know. So let's just start and work through it a small section at a time. In his personal greeting to Gaius in the first 4 verses, we don't know who this gentleman is. It's a very common name. There are other Gaiuses in the New Testament, very common in that era. But it's clear there's a strong personal connection. So John, in appealing to Gaius, is not just giving him instructions. Hey, listen, buddy, you need to do this, 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 and this. It's not a checklist. But out of a position of warmth, out of a strength of relationship, and I would suggest because of a shared trust, he is able to give some direction, some suggestions to Gaius on what he should do. And I think this gives us a great clue to the nature of the dynamic of that early church. Even though they were separated by distance and by time, presumably, it had been a while since they had seen each other, that trust was built on such a strong foundation, that original intimacy as they had worked together and as they had grown together in the faith was so powerful, so real, that it continued to provide a platform for John to encourage Gaius, presumably much younger than John, because we know John is an elder statesman in the church, a younger man, on how to proceed in addressing this problem. So that's his personal greeting. Then he makes a personal observation about Gaius and his faith, and in the community of faith, the dynamic there, in verses 5 to 8. Again, he's speaking to Gaius. He says, "Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing for the brothers." What a great commendation. What higher praise really can there be than you are being faithful? And we go back to Paul and go back to Jesus, and their measure of effectiveness in ministry was, how do you measure a good steward? By faithfulness. It's not by popularity, it's not by sphere of influence, it's not by charisma and charm and how many people you have following you on Twitter or Facebook. It's faithfulness. And for some, that sphere of faithfulness may be very hidden, and others may not know about it, but there's a high level of faithfulness there. And this is the joy that John has. He says, I hear you are being faithful in what you're doing for the brothers. John is encouraging Gaius to remind people, to encourage those who are committed to this work of the gospel. But now he comes to the problem person, and his name is Diotrephes, and we really don't know a lot about him, but he's described in verses 9 and 10. So here's the problem, and it really boils down to 2 things. One, Diotrephes seems to be envious of position and power. He's envious of John. He wants to have that influence. He wants to be the person who's at the top of the heap. And because his commitment, his loyalty, and his passion is to himself and to the self-gratification by being in that position, he is willing to destroy the dynamic within the community of faith. And secondly, he's committed and creates obstacles to the work of the gospel because of this, harassing kingdom workers, devaluing, gossiping about John. And obviously, this then creates a hindrance to the gospel on many levels. First of all, it prevents people who are in this process of engaging in kingdom work from accomplishing their kingdom work because they're denied resources, they're distracted by this problem, and then those who want to help them are discouraged from being a part of what could be an amazing opportunity to serve the kingdom. But secondly, and probably more importantly, is Diotrephes destroys the unity of the body. And I've said it many times, the number one issue that receives condemnation in the New Testament for the church is those who destroy unity. Those who create, now it's one thing to have a difference of opinion. We're not talking about that. We're talking about intentionally undercutting and undermining people who are seeking to serve God and to promote the kingdom. And sometimes people are going to make mistakes while they do that. We're all going to make mistakes. We have a great idea that wouldn't it be wonderful to do this so we can share the gospel, and it goes, it falls. Well, we don't criticize the effort. We don't undermine people because they've done that. But Diotrephes, the greatest thing that he has done here is destroy the unity of these people that John loves. And he has commended them for being faithful, for being, that would imply, unified and working together and harmonized in what they're doing for the sake of the kingdom. And Diotrephes has completely destroyed that. He now offers a positive example. And he goes on to talk about somebody else, Demetrius. He said, now let me show you a positive example of Demetrius. I think Demetrius here is probably the leader of these kingdom workers, these itinerant ministers or missionaries that were going out. And he has, in experiencing all of this oppression by Diotrephes, he has responded and modeled truth and love in integrity. His response has been to take the high road. And the word has gotten back to John, and he has trusted God that whatever these problems are, that these obstacles being created for them, God will sort it out. And part of the way God does that is through the Apostle John. And John's praise for Demetrius, is for his love and his faithfulness for serving, not on his accomplishments. And John says, the important thing I've noticed about this young man, I'm presuming he's young, Demetrius, is that he is well spoken because of his faithfulness and his love. He doesn't talk about what he has accomplished. And obstacles and struggles in the church dynamic, we're always going to have these kinds of problems. There are always going to be, because we're all human, we're all broken, and sometimes even with the best of intention, we may cause there to be struggles in relationships. But as we look at the book of 3 John, and as we model it, we realize one of the things we need as a church is to keep our eyes on issues like faithfulness and serving one another and the love we have for one another.